Hello and welcome to another Doctor's Assistant 1 video. Today I'm doing a review of Doctor Who, An Unearthly Child, so the original, you might say. This is, of course, if you didn't already know, the first ever Doctor Who episode ever, really, in 50 plus years. This is the original, all the way back on the 23rd of November 1963. Doctor Who started, it's been a long time coming, really, to watch this one. Hashtag fake fan for the most of my life, clearly. I've been watching Doctor Who since I was about 7-8 years old. So for 16 years of my life, which is kind of insane. And yeah, this is the original. And I finally watched it today. So in 2021. I'll be going over the packaging first, and then the sort of story and stuff. You've got Susan Foreman there. You've got the TARDIS. You've got some effects, sort of like the sort of title sequence. You've got the scrapyard. I am Foreman scrapyard. Totter's Lane. TARDIS. This sort of purpley sort of effect, or sort of purple colour, pink on the bottom, with banner with the William Hartnell years, 1963 to 1966, PG DVD film, BBC DVDs, and then on the spine you've got similar sort of information, to entertain, BBC, Doctor Who, and then An Unearthly Child, William Hartnell, BBC, all like other bits. Special features, the runtime, which was very confusing to me, somewhat. The bio, the strip of images on the top there, who wrote it, who's starring in it, and whatnot. And then you've got on the inside, the writer's notes, as well as the disc. And then, as for the story, it's a four-part story, but you also get the pilot episode, which I'm not sure how that's different from the first part, but of An Unearthly Child, but I guess it's interesting because they might have edited it slightly different and that, and it is cool that it's included, I guess, as part of preserving history almost. You've got, because if I'm not mistaken, they recorded the first 25-minute episodes, 23-minute episode. And then basically JFK got assassinated, and then basically Verity Lambert wanted another go, crack at the whip, because, she felt like no one was obviously watching Doctor Who because of that, which makes total sense, because that was such a big thing that happened in the 60s and that. So they re-aired part 1, and then sort of went from there, I suppose. Part 1 is phenomenal, it just is, a monumentous episode. It's weird because it's I wouldn't say it's the most sort of action-packed or big in terms of budget, obviously, or, as I say, special effects or budget or even acting, I guess. I mean, I guess the best actors are the main actors, because that's about it. You don't really get any massive side characters. You really do just get the story starts, and then it just sort of goes from there, if that makes sense. There is no real time for filler in part 1 and that, and I think that is what just makes it so special, the fact that it just sort of starts, as dumb as that sounds, with Ian and Barbara, the two school teachers, the history and science teacher, and Susan being this sort of quirky, sort of overly academic sort of student, but then also being flummoxed by something simple, and Caroline John as Susan Foreman is probably the weakest link for me personally, but granted, she's this sort of childlike character, even though she only really liked the idea of the character because originally, if I'm not mistaken, she was pitched a character with some sort of superpower ability of psychic ability, which they then just sort of later on dropped. As well as that, and if I'm not mistaken, again, there's in the original pilot they might have said where specifically she was from. Oh, well, not where specifically, but more they gave more specific details, you know, like saying like, oh, I'm from the future in the 42nd century, and Sidney Newman really hated that because he was like, no, that's way too specific, make it more vague, this is Doctor Who, like, who are these people, you know, sort of thing. So like in the part one that I watched, she just says, well, I am from the future, you know, or from another world in a future time, sort of thing, and that's about it, you know. And that, as far as she goes with that. Bill Hartnell is phenomenal in that first part. I think he is very much the sort of shining star, you know. Have you ever thought what it would be like to be wanted in the fourth dimension? To be exiled from your own home? Well, yes, without any family or friends? Yes. Well, me and Susan will get back. Yes, we will. One day. Yes. Sort of thing. And I love the costume that he's in. This sort of very Edwardian-y costume. It looks very sort of his Doctor, you know, it's iconic at this point, you know, as is the TARDIS, you know, the sort of design. And Ian even says, and this is probably quite controversial as well, actually, now 50 plus years on, you know, Ian points out, you know, the humming noise from the TARDIS, oh, it's alive, you know, sort of remarking that maybe, as I say, that this sort of ship is an actual organic thing, which again is quite controversial now, 50 plus years on, amongst fans. But yeah, it's you know, it's fascinating, you know, and I love the fact that these characters are introduced as smart characters, being very academic, you know, being a science teacher and being a history teacher, that, you know, they don't just go, like, if this was done in the new series and it was a 45-minute episode and that's it, like, they'd just go, oh yeah, we believe you, oh okay, let's go into the past or the future or whatever you're on about, Doctor, and then he presses a button and then they're in the caveman times. No, here there's a lot of friction, and Ian does not believe the Doctor and does not even really like the Doctor that much in this story. It comes across like, you know, the Doctor, this incarnation of the Doctor is very unlike any other Doctor. It's weird to think, like, not until sort of mid to late William Hartnell, if not even into Pat Troughton's era, do we get the character or the archetype for the character for the next, you know, 40 plus, you know, 40, 50 years, you know. In this first episode, he is very, you know, almost, you know, comes across like a baddie almost sometimes, you know. I guess the Eisen, or the windows into this world would, I'd like to think, be Ian and Barbara, and they are brilliantly acted and performed by the two actors who play their parts, you know. I immediately warmed to them both, you know. And I like the fact that because William Hartnell was in his early, or mid to late, or mid 50s, I think, he was like 56, in this, I love the fact that they've got the younger actor to be the strong sort of character, you know. And I guess Barbara is there as more of the emotional sort of side, and then, you know, you've got sort of Susan there to kind of ground maybe the Doctor a bit more, and calm him down when he's getting a bit pissy, basically, you know. Because as well, that's another thing, although there are a lot of characters in this, you know, it's interesting in terms of the TARDIS crew and TARDIS team, because there is a lot of friction, you know, and that I feel like, you know, and I think part one is probably the peak of this story. It dips down massively by part 2 and 3. Like, I just think it's not even enraging, it's just boring, you know, like, which I don't think Doctor Who should ever be, you know. I think parts 4, it picks up back up again, and I love the cliffhanger of part 4, and that it's so simple and kind of almost silly, and that it just works for me. And I love the fact that part 1 ends with the sort of, you know, sort of London, and then we zoom out almost into like the blackness of space almost. And I love the fact that Russell did the opposite to that, you know, grounding Doctor Who for the 21st century. You know, we're going to start in space in that first shot, and then Earth, and then zoom straight into London, into the Powell estate, onto Rose as a character. Almost, as I say, a total polar opposite to this. You know, you are going from the mundanity of 1963 London and Earth to the insanity that is the caveman times, and I love that as well. Like much like with the end of the world, Doctor Who don't just go, oh, we've got a time machine. We'll just like dip our toe into showing this companion or these characters the future or the past. We'll only go 10, 20 years in the past or 10, 20 years in the future. No. We'll go, 5 billion years into the future with, like, end of the world or whatever. Or we'll go, right to the beginning where cavemen were a thing and that, and that. And, yeah, the cliffhanger at part 1 is iconic as well, of having that shadow and the box and the TARDIS there. And I love the TARDIS dematerialising and going away from the cave people and that when they're about to throw the spears at the TARDIS. That was cool. I don't particularly like the title sequence music playing over the copper being outside the sort of junkyard sort of gate. I thought that was a bit strange personally, but yeah. What else? Yeah, I think for me parts 2 and 3 proper drag. And even though they're 20 minutes, they feel 23 to 24 minutes, they feel like hours long because there's not a lot of real dialogue there, and even if there is, it's very basic, it's very boring and dull, and, it's a lot of the cave people look the same, so it's very difficult to sort of really connect / keep your interest in these characters because they all look very similar, and then of course they sound very similar. And I don't even mean just look similar in costume, but also in their faces and the teeth and the hair and the way they've been the makeup department have done them as well as costume designers. They look very similar, and then obviously their speech is very primitive, which makes sense, but again it just makes it very sort of so far removed from anything else. And then obviously the elephant in the room is that it's in black and white, which might take some people out of the story if you're viewing it now, and that doesn't bother me almost as much as I say, some of the cave people just being a bit, like, difficult to follow, and that I do like the line of, like, fear is a companion, sort of thing, which I honestly thought in Listen that was, like, a Moffat thing, like a brand new Moffat thing. Yeah, obviously it's clearly a reference to this story. It's a reference to, the Cave of Skulls, I think, and that. And I like the titles. I like the different titles, I guess. Although I guess that really does sort of signal that each part is a separate episode almost. Even though I prefer thinking of An Unearthly Child, a 4-part story. Thinking of all four of these stories as, or episodes as being 4 episodes for one story and all episodes. So this is one story and all episode split up into 4 parts as opposed to 4 episodes of one story. Personally, but that's just me. But yeah, as I say, each part has got its own title, I suppose, and that's Ian and Barbara work well together as a collective. The TARDIS interior is of course iconic, that original set, just seeing Ian run into there, like blunder into there, or Barbara and then him kind of barrel roll into the TARDIS is just again phenomenal. That's history in the making. It's just mad to think of now. I think overall I'd give this story a sort of 7 out of 10. I don't feel like I should be able... I don't know, I feel awful saying that because obviously without this story, every other story wouldn't exist. I mean, if I was just rating part 1, An Unearthly Child, I'd give it a 10 out of 10, honestly. It's probably a must-watch, that first part, that first 23 minutes. But as I say, the other 2 episodes just drag so much, but then again it kind of picks up a bit more when the Doctor and the TARDIS team finally give the tribe the fire and that they're asking for. So and you sort of, for lack of a better term, at that home stretch you can see the light outside the cave almost, and it's insane to think, like, the Doctor here is just so sort of prim and proper and stern and that, and very proper about how he goes about things, and he's still even calling the TARDIS ship, which I kind of like. It's so quaint and so sort of removed from any other Doctor Who that where normally you'd refer to it as the TARDIS, it's just ship, you know, and both Susan and the Doctor make reference to why is the TARDIS and or ship not changed, do you know what I mean? Which they never say because of the chameleon circuit, but it's alluded that it can change, you know, or even referenced and or made a point that there is a point made that it could change normally. It's, you know, in the past it's changed multiple times, you know, depending on where we are. And that, which I think's cool. What else? I don't know. As I say, I just give this sort of episode a 7 out of 10 overall if you were watching all 4 parts. But again, honestly, I'd recommend just watching part 1 myself, personally. Or maybe a better viewing experience might be to watch part 1 one week and then part 2 the next week, and, you know, split it up across a month. Maybe it would flow better as a story if you actually did do that, because I've never actually done that with a classic Doctor Who episode as of this recording. I always watch classic Doctor Who in one sitting like a madman, you know, and especially if, you know, it's a 8 or 10 part story, I'm definitely a madman then. But yeah, thanks for watching. Please do comment, rate and subscribe.